Hello and welcome to today's video about comparing and ordering fractions. The first topic we're going to cover today is ordering fractions. The first thing we want to do when ordering fractions is always look at the denominators to see if they are the same. In the case of this set of fractions, 3 of the denominators are the same and 1 is different. We can still determine which fraction is the smallest, which is what the order we're going to put it in from least to greatest, by looking at the numerators. 1/8 is a much smaller piece than 5/8 or 3/8 simply because 1 is smaller than both 5 and 3. 15/16 has a different denominator, but you can tell that this is actually the biggest fraction, not because of its denominator, but because 15/16 of this fraction, or of this whole, are taken up. That's almost the entire piece of the whole. So in this case, we have 1/8 as our smallest fraction and 15/16 as our biggest fraction, and now we're done with both of those. Now we have to compare 5/8 and 3/8. And this is pretty simple. Since their denominators are the same number, all we have to do is look at the numerator and see which one of those is bigger. 3/8 is smaller than 5/8 because 3 is smaller than 5. So the next smallest fraction is 3/8, and the next fraction is 5/8, leaving once again the biggest fraction to be 15/16. Let's look at one more example of this. Here we have the fractions 3/5, 4/10, 9/20, and 1/25. We're going to put these in order from least to greatest, just like we did last time. The smallest one of these fractions is very simply and clearly 1/25. This is because any whole that's split up into 25 pieces is going to have smaller pieces than any whole that's split up into 5 or 10 or 20 pieces. And since only one of those one of those pieces is being considered here, 1/25 is the smallest. Now we have 3 more fractions to compare. One thing that I notice about these 3 fractions is that they can easily be changed to have matching denominators. The matching denominator that will work for all 3 of them is going to be 20. This is because in order to make 20 either 5 or 10, we would have to divide 9 and 20 by 2, which is not a possibility with fractions. You can't mix fractions and decimals. And 9 divided by 2, or 4, would include a decimal as part of its answer. So in this case, it's much easier to change these 2 denominators than it is this denominator. Here's how you change the denominators of a fraction. First, you have to think about what can I do to the denominator to make it equal to the denominator I want it to be equal to, in this case, 20. With 5, what I have to do is multiply it by 4. And the rule with fractions is that whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So I'm going to also multiply the top by 4 as well. 3 times 4 equals 12, and 5 times 4 equals 20, which is exactly the denominator we were looking for. And then I'm going to move on to 10. What do I have to do to 10 to make it equal to 20? I'm going to multiply it by 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top, so I'm also going to multiply the 4 by 2. 2 times 4 is 8. And 2 times 10 is 20, and now I have 3 fractions that I can actually compare. Looking at these fractions, I can see that the next smallest one is actually 4/10 because its equivalent is 8/20. So 4/10 is going to come next in our list from least to greatest. Next, I'm going to look at my last 2 fractions, 12/20 and 9/20, and I can see that 9/20 is going to be my 3rd biggest one because 9 is smaller than 12. This leaves me with 3/5 as my largest fraction. So the order of fractions of these fractions from least to greatest are 1/25, 4/10, 9/20, and 3/5. This is what's known as the fraction stick chart. We are going to be using this in class tomorrow, so pay close attention to how this chart works. There are a few different ways we can use this chart. The first way is that we can use it to skip count. The fraction stick is a model for the whole, or the one, that shows fractions for an interval between 0 and 1. Each row of this chart shows fraction sticks that go from 0 to 1. The one in your math journal will show fraction sticks that go from 0 to 2, and they're divided into unit fractions for a particular denominator. For example, the third row of this fraction chart shows one stick which is divided into thirds. There are 3 pieces in this row, each labeled 1/3. The pieces can be used to count by thirds. Here is the third row, and you can clearly see those 3 pieces divided up equally. The second way that the fraction stick chart can be used is to find equivalent fractions. There are many different examples of pairs of fractions that name the same part of a whole. These are equivalent fractions. For example, 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2. Let's do a quick example. Find the equivalent fractions for 2/3. There are a couple of steps we are going to follow. Step 1 is that the denominator is 3, so we're going to use the third stick to locate the fraction 2/3. We're going to count the pieces from left to right, and the right edge of the second piece is 2/3. Here's what this looks like. My third stick is right here. Here's 1/3, and here's 2/3. So my 2/3 piece, my 2/3 of this piece falls right here. Step 2 is to place one edge of a straight edge at 2/3 that is along the right edge of the second 1/3 piece. The straight edge should be parallel to the sides of the fraction stick chart. Now we're going to look for other fraction sticks on the chart along the straight edge. On the 6th stick, the straight edge touches the right edge of a piece. We're going to count the sixth stick pieces from left to right. The straight edge is at the end of the 4th piece. So if we look, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see that my straight edge falls right here at the end of that 4th piece. This stands for 4/6. So 4/6 is equivalent to 2/3. If I keep tracing my finger down my straight edge, I am going to find that the next equivalent fraction happens in the 9th stick. We're going to do the same thing we did with the 6th, and we're going to count over to figure out how many ninths this is equal to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6/9 is another equivalent fraction. If I continue to trace my finger down my straight edge, I can see that I have another equivalent fraction that happens in the 12th stick. I'm going to count over from the left edge to the straight edge to figure out how many 12ths this is equal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8/12 is another equivalent fraction. This is how you can use the fraction stick chart to help yourself find equivalent fractions. The third way that we can use this fraction stick chart is to compare fractions. So for example, we are going to compare 4/9 and 3/8. Let's find our ninths first. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to draw a little line right here to remind myself where that's at. And I want to compare that with 3/8. So my eighths, 1, 2, 3, happens right here. So you can see very clearly that these two sticks are different sizes. In order to help me determine which one is bigger, I am going to use my straight edge again. As you can see, I have placed my straight edge along the 4/9 part of the fraction stick chart. Since I have already located 3/8 right above 4/9, all I have to do now is compare. Since 3/8 is to the left of 4/9, it is less than 4/9. Conversely, 4/9 is to the right of 3/8, so it is greater than 3/8. These are some of the many ways to use the fraction stick chart. You will get a chance to do this with your own chart in your own journal tomorrow. Now let's talk about how to add using fraction sticks. Let's start with some simple addition. 2/4 plus 2/4. You are going to be asked to use a fraction stick to show exactly what it is you did when you added. Here's how that works. I am going to shade two separate pieces of this bar to show what pieces I have added together. So I'll start with my first fraction, which is 2/4. And I'm going to shade in 2/4 of this fraction stick. Then I'm going to shade in the rest of the fraction stick using my second fraction, which is also 2/4. And it will look like this. 2/4 plus 2/4 is equal to 4/4. You can see that I shaded my entire stick down below, and that's how I know that. This is very simply how you add with a fraction stick. Let's try one more example just to be sure that we're clear. Now let's look at 1/4 plus 3/8. Below you see a fraction stick that is divided into 8 pieces. There are some longer lines in here that denote fourths and a half, and we might have to use some of those in order to solve this. The first thing I'm going to do on this fraction stick is shade in my 1/4. 2 of these boxes are worth 1/4 because, as I said a minute ago, this is also divided into fourths with 2 pieces representing each fourth. The next thing I need to do is shade in my 3/8, and since all of these smaller pieces are 8s, all I need to do is shade in 3 of them to make 3/8. Now you can see that 1/4 plus 3/8 is the same thing as 5/8. That is because I have shaded in a total of 5 of my 8s. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, leaving these last 3/8 open and not part of our final answer. Here is your practice problem of the day. Add these two fractions together. 3/4 plus 4/8. Don't forget that each one of these bars down below is divided into 8s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Same thing over here. It's also divided into fourths with these slightly longer lines, and you can also see where it's divided into halves with that long line right in the middle. Please draw these fraction sticks in your notebook and shade them as you would if they were in your math journal. Then write your answer. You can write it with a numerator of 8 as an improper fraction or as a mixed number. Good luck!